Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into another amazing book?
Always.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into Colleen Hoover's Maybe Now.
Oh, this one is a whirlwind.
It really is. We've got interconnected relationships, personal journeys, love, loss, and self-discovery.
All wrapped up in this incredible story.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating is that these characters are facing some really extraordinary situations.
Hoover doesn't hold back, does she?
Definitely not. So we're dropped right into this web of relationships, and at the center of it all is Maggie.
Maggie, living with cystic fibrosis but refusing to let that define her.
Oh, absolutely. This is a woman who knows how to seize the day.
Remember that bucket list? She's already skydived and driven a race car.
Yeah, talk about living life to the fullest. But she's also dealing with a recent breakup from Ridge.
Her deaf ex-boyfriend.
Yes. And then, to complicate things further, there are sparks flying with Jake.
A doctor she meets while, wait for it,
Skydiving. It's like fate, don't you think?
it's hard to deny the hand of destiny there.
But what I find so interesting about Maggie is her outlook on life.
She's pragmatic about her illness, but she's also incredibly adventurous.
It's like she's found this perfect balance between acceptance and truly living in the moment.
You said it.
And that really comes through in her relationship with Jake, which we'll talk about more in a bit.
Okay, sounds good.
But first, let's shift gears and talk about Ridge.
Okay.
His connection with Sydney is unlike anything I've ever seen.
Truly unique.
Like she just gets him, on every single level.
Absolute.
And their communication through sign language and text messages is so powerful.
It's like they have their own language.
Exactly. And their shared love of music, too.
Right. Ridge writes these incredible songs, inspired by Sydney, and she feels this profound connection to his music.
Remember when she described one of his songs as sexy?
Oh, yeah. It shows how deeply they connect soul to soul.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, but here's where things start to get really interesting and maybe a little messy. This web of relationships, remember? It gets a little tangled.
Ah, yes.
So Ridge is best friends with Warren, who's dating Bridget. Maggie and Sydney are trying to navigate a new friendship, and then there's Ridge's past with Maggie.
Lots of layers there.
Definitely. It's like Hoover intentionally creates this tension, this push and pull between the characters.
Like she's making them face their feelings head on.
Exactly. And then there's that whole Instagram incident.
Oh, the Instagram post. Can't forget that.
Maggie posts this seemingly harmless picture of Ridge, and it causes a huge misunderstanding between Ridge and Sydney.
Talk about a chain reaction.
I know. And Warren gets involved, defending Ridge, and it just highlights the complexity of their friendship.
Loyalty, boundaries, it all comes into play.
Right. But what struck me was Sydney's reaction. She was hurt, but she still showed empathy for Maggie.
She did. It's pretty amazing considering this
I
situation.
know, and she even went to apologize to Maggie for kissing Ridge while he was still with her.
That says a lot about her character.
For sure. I'm not sure I would have been that understanding, but then we see Sydney thinking about a career change.
Moving towards psychology.
Yeah. Do you think that's connected to all of this? Is she trying to understand people's motivations?
That's an interesting thought. It's like she's not just observing, she wants to understand the why behind it all.
Right. Okay, so we have Maggie embracing life, Ridge finding this deep connection with Sydney, and all these complicated relationships starting to unravel.
Phew, that's a lot to unpack.
It is. Before we move on, what stood out to you the most about this first part of the story?
I think it's the power of Maggie's bucket list.
Oh, tell me more.
It's more than just a list of things to do. It's a statement. It's about how she chooses to live, despite her challenges.
Like she's saying, yes, life is precious, but I'm going to experience it all.
Yes, exactly that.
It really makes you think about your own priorities, doesn't it?
It does.
But Maggie's story isn't just about checking things off a list. It's about the people she connects with along the way.
And how those relationships shape her journey.
Exactly. And speaking of relationships, let's talk about Jake, the doctor who literally falls into Maggie's life.
I mean, talk about a meet cute, right?
It's pretty epic, isn't it?
But their connection goes beyond that initial thrill.
Yeah, there's a real depth to their conversations.
You can tell they're intellectually matched.
Definitely. And Jake is clearly drawn to Maggie's strength and independence.
But he's also fascinated by her perspective on life.
Like he's learning from her, too.
And then there's his work, this whole exploration of the brain and heart connection.
Right. He's not just a love interest. He brings this whole other element to the story.
It's a really intriguing layer.
So do you think that's why their first date felt like such a turning point for Maggie?
I think so. It's like she allowed herself to believe in love again.
To open herself up to that possibility.
And it makes you think, How much of attraction is really about the heart versus the brain?
It's a question Jake's research kind of forces us to consider, doesn't it? Okay, so we have Maggie and Jake's connection deepening, and then she makes this big decision to move to Austin.
Right.
And where does she end up?
In the same apartment complex as Ridge and Warren.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
It's like Hoover is intentionally turning up the heat.
Creating this pressure cooker of emotions.
Like a
And everyone's forced to renegotiate boundaries, to compromise.
Even Bridget, who's initially uncomfortable with the situation, finds a way to coexist with Maggie.
It's almost like this forced proximity forces them to grow.
To confront things they might have otherwise avoided.
And just when things seem to be settling into this new normal, we get a bombshell.
A proposal.
Not just one, actually.
Right. Jake proposes to Maggie, and then Warren, in true Warren fashion, follows with a proposal to Bridget.
It's an engagement explosion.
So much happening all at once.
I know, but it's also kind of beautiful, right?
It is. It's like a testament to their friendships and how they support each other's happiness.
Even amidst all the drama.
Exactly. But let's backtrack a bit, because there's a lot that leads up to these proposals.
Okay, what did you have in mind?
Remember those songwriting sessions between Ridge and Sydney?
Oh, yeah. Those were powerful.
It was more than just music. It was a window into Ridge's soul.
And especially that one song he calls his truth.
The one inspired by Sydney before they even really spoke.
The one he wrote when he was still with Maggie. It adds such a complicated layer to their love story.
Right. It's almost like their connection was faded.
Something Ridge initially tried to resist.
And Sydney's reaction to that song is so profound. Remember what she said? It made her sad for Ridge.
Like he was living a life that wasn't truly fulfilling.
Yeah. Like she recognized his longing for something more.
Even before he did. But Maggie's move to Austin wasn't just about being closer to friends.
Her health was a factor, too.
Yeah, and remember when she collapses in Jake's office?
It's a heart-wrenching scene.
It really is. It exposes everyone's vulnerabilities.
For Maggie, it's a reminder of her own fragility.
And for Ridge, it reawakens his concern for her.
Which creates that tension with Sydney.
Right. And then we have that confrontation at Maggie's house.
Between Ridge and Sydney. Intense.
All the unspoken feelings just come pouring out.
Ridge's outburst reveals just how much he still cares for Maggie.
But also the frustration he's carrying.
It was a really charged moment.
What did you think about Ridge's behavior there? Was it justified?
It's hard to say. I mean, his protective instincts toward Maggie are understandable.
But especially given their history.
Right. But I also felt for Sydney.
She's trying to build a life with him.
And his outburst, while maybe understandable, was hurtful.
It's a difficult situation, no easy answers.
But Sydney handles it with incredible grace.
She doesn't shy away from the conversation.
But she approaches it with empathy and a desire to understand.
And in the midst of all this drama, we see this unexpected friendship blossoming.
Bridget and Sydney.
Yeah, those pizza and wine nights.
It's a reminder that even in chaos, there's room for connection.
And it shows a different side of Bridget.
Who initially seemed wary of Maggie.
Definitely. And then there's Jake. The steady presence amidst the storm.
His patience and understanding really stand out.
Coupled with his unique perspective on love and attraction.
Remember that medical study he describes?
About severing communication between the heart and brain? Yeah, that was mind-blowing.
It suggests that our hearts and minds can sometimes be at war.
Creating this internal conflict. And it made me think, is love a choice?
Or is it something that just happens?
I don't know the answer, but it's a fascinating question to consider.
Absolutely.
And speaking of things to consider, what about that engagement ring?
Oh, the one Ridge has been holding on to for 3 years.
Maggie's grandmother's ring.
The one he was supposed to give to Maggie.
It's like this symbol of their past, this unfinished business.
And then there's Sydney contemplating a career change.
Moving from music education to psychology.
That's a bold move.
It shows how much she's grown, her willingness to pursue her passions.
And speaking of embracing life, we can't forget about Maggie's bucket list.
Right. It's more than just a list. It's a testament to her zest for life.
It's like she's saying, life is precious, and I'm going to experience it all.
And it makes you think about your own priorities.
What would be on your bucket list?
Exactly. But Maggie's story is also about the people she connects with.
And how those relationships shape her journey.
Which brings us back to that chaotic dinner and those unexpected proposals. Jake proposes to Maggie, then Warren to Bridget, And then we're left wondering, is Ridge gonna propose to Sydney too?
I know, right?
3 engagements. It's pure chaos,
It is.
but it's also incredibly heartwarming.
Oh, for sure.
It's like Hoover is telling us that even when everything is uncertain, love always finds a way.
Oh, I love that.
It really is a whirlwind of emotions.
It is.
But it also shows how strong their friendships are.
Absolutely.
They support each other even while they're figuring things out for themselves.
It reminds me of that quote, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
So true. But before we send them all off to Vegas for a triple wedding,
Vegas, baby.
we should take a minute to think about everything we've uncovered in maybe now.
Yep. Okay.
We've seen Maggie grow and Ridge evolve.
And Sydney's empathy never wavers.
And Jake brings such a different view of love.
It's true. We've seen it all.
Chaotic proposal.
Complicated friendships.
Forgiveness.
It's like their lives are all woven together.
It really is. And we impact each other in ways we don't even realize.
That's a good point.
It also shows us that personal growth can be messy,
Oh, yeah.
but eventually it helps us understand ourselves and our relationships better.
I think that's one of the big takeaways in this book.
For sure. These characters face their fears, they're vulnerable, and they choose love and happiness.
Even when things are tough.
Yeah. And it's not just romantic love.
Right.
It's about love between friends and family and even the love we have for ourselves.
Maybe. Shows us how important those connections are.
And that we all need each other. So what can we learn from all of this? What can we apply to our own lives?
Well, I think it makes us stop and think about what's important to us.
Our values and priorities.
Exactly. Are we really living our lives to the fullest?
Are we taking chances and going after what we want?
And are we appreciating the people we love?
These are big questions.
They are.
And I think everyone who reads Maybe Now thinks about them.
It's a powerful book.
It is. For me, it's a reminder to be present, to allow myself to be vulnerable, and to never stop exploring.
I like that.
Remember Maggie's bucket list?
Yeah.
Maybe we all need a bucket list. Not to race against time, but to remember what makes us come alive.
To figure out what brings us joy and makes us want to grow.
Yes, exactly. And it's never too late to start.
It really isn't.
So to wrap things up, I want to ask you one last question. What would be on your bucket list? What adventures are waiting for you?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Don't be afraid to dream big and then go after those dreams.
Because maybe now is all we have.
I love that. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Maybe Now.
Yeah.
It's done.
We'll see you next time.